Yeah, so I've had diarrhea all day.
Oh, that's no bueno.
It's the molasses of the back.
Yeah.
Of the backside.
Yeah. You know what would be nice is if to hear a story about molasses.
Well, that's good news, Chris, because I have just the story for you.
Well, that's good, because we are the History Boys.
Yes,
I'm Chris.
I'm Tyler.
We got Tyler.
Tyler's here.
And
Duke?
Duke. Yeah, I guess I could be Duke now.
Duke Sanchez.
I am Jerry Nash.
And Zach, of course, is on audio.
Via satellite in his remote bunker, several stories underneath the crust of the United States.
That's me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just hanging out.
Safe from molasses.
Certainly safe from
Well, I
molasses.
mean, if you did happen to get molasses down there, you're not getting it out, though.
No, you're not going to pump that stuff out.
You're going to have to abandon the bunker.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, find a new bunker.
It's a sweet, sticky grave.
Luckily, we built that separate molasses tunnel for him to escape out of in the case that molasses pours down into the bunker.
We got an engraved sign for him and everything that says, "In case of molasses, leave here."
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even know about the molasses flood at the time. I barely know anything about it now.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Good.
Because I didn't do the research.
I know.
Jerry, tell us a story about molasses.
I'm glad. I'm glad you want to hear about
Now,
it. Well, not many people are familiar with the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919. The fatally tragic events that happened 100 years ago.
Every time the more I learn about this, the more I'm like, it's like they're like, we're trying to tell you it's tragic, it's not hilarious. It's not something that was like made up for like an old-timey cartoon. But then in my research, I heard that one of its nicknames is legitimately the Great Molassacre.
Are you kidding me?
The Great Boston Molassacre of 1919.
They did not.
Yes.
They did not.
It's
call
in
it
the
the
Wikipedia. It's a primary source.
They did not call it the Molassacre.
They called it the Molassacre.
Really?
I would if I was there.
I think 20 what is it? 117 people injured, 21 dead. That's a Molassacre if you ask me.
That's something I did not find.
Citations.
Bada bing, bada boom.
All right.
I'm not going to check those citations.
It was not in Dark Tide, which is a fantastic book.
It was in the Boston Molasses Disaster, Causes of the Molasses Tank Explosion.
Spoiler alert.
By Eric Hendrickson.
No. There you go. Not our primary source
Released
for research in this episode, but I think worth shouting out. Anyway.
Yeah, this a giant tank that stored a lot of molasses basically burst in Boston's North End neighborhood on January 15th, 1919, and completely destroyed the neighborhood.
Yeah. It's, I literally think at the time they said, there goes the neighborhood, and they meant it. And just a little bit.
And back then, they everyone talked with like the old timey voice.
Oh,
no,
there goes the neighborhood.
There goes my molasses, boy.
Do the Charleston at it. It's doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, that molasses is all over me. Yeah.
Oh, raspberries. My sweet boy's drowning in molasses.
Again.
Who's going to run the factory when I get too old?
Just to give a little bit of perspective into how big the molasses tank was.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay, are we not there yet? Okay,
we're not there
sorry.
yet. We're not there yet. First, I want to talk about molasses.
You did too much research.
I did too much
You
research.
did too much research
and
this
now I
time.
want to flex all the time.
Can't you be more like me? No research.
I feel like there's a happy middle.
There is. A couple of things about molasses before we get to the actual tank here.
Oh, here we go.
Oh boy. Molasses is a non-Newtonian substance, meaning that force has to be applied to it in order for it to move. Like, it's not water. Like, it doesn't just run everywhere. It's like toothpaste or ketchup. Yeah. Like, you have to, like, hit the bottle for the ketchup to come out.
High viscosity.
Yeah.
Famously high viscosity.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So considering this physical property, molasses would be far more deadly than just a giant wave of water. And swimming in it is impossipossible.
Not with that attitude.
Could you imagine if it was a non-Euclidean liquid?
That would be even worse.
That would be pretty cool.
I don't know if that would be.
I just like saying non-Euclidean.
I was gonna say.
I was gonna say, are you just flexing your
I did it.
vocabulary?
Does that mean
Exactly.
it's like a substance that can only have like vaginal orgasms
Exactly.
rather than
Jeez.
Euclidean?
Yeah, because there's no clit.
Yeah.
Non.
No Clitigan.
Yeah, no Clitian.
That's funny.
So
pretty
you really
good.
got to get in there and hit the walls in the back.
So not only is molasses used for like syrups and sweeteners and fuck knows what other atrocities because it's fucking disgusting if you've ever tried it. Although,
Did you cover rum?
Well, it's used. I was gonna say, it is used for booze and barbecue sauce
And munitions.
Oh, hell yeah.
Well,
Well, at the time.
its main thing that people used it for was distilling it down into alcohol, and the alcohol, instead of making rum out of it, they would make munitions out of
Yeah,
it.
or fuel.
And in this case, that's what they were doing. They were distilling it down and using it for munitions.
Well, and a couple other things is it is a diabetic sweetener. You can add it to things if you are diabetic, and it won't affect your insulin levels.
Is that true?
It's 100% true. It's also
That is amazing.
high in potassium, and I think it's high in something else. Probably deliciousness. It's sweet.
It is not delicious.
I mean,
it is disgusting.
What about like molasses
That's
cookies?
your opinion.
Gross.
And also, I mean, you add some tomatoes to
booze,
it,
barbecue
vinegar.
sauce. That's all I care about.
I mean,
It's an ingredient,
just
not a,
barbecue sauce
I
alone.
know.
That's what we're talking about.
Dude, I love
And
barbecue sauce.
gingerbread. No, thank you.
What if it
I'm
was the
sorry.
great Boston barbecue
Oh,
sauce flood?
Oh, that'd be delicious.
That'd be
I mean-
so good. Everybody be like dipping their ribs in it and stuff.
Yeah.
like-
Just out their window.
My son was crushed under a 35-mile-an-hour wave of barbecue sauce, but it's so
But
delicious.
but at the funeral, he tasted delicious.
Jesus.
Flood.
We are not
I-
joking about the heroism. of
I'm
some of
joking
these
about the fictional victims of the barbecue sauce flood.
Also
never
in
speak
1919, it was a rough year for northern Boston.
people. Yes, it was pretty bad. So during this time, Prohibition had not taken effect just yet. At the time the tank was built, we were just entering World War One, and they kind of rushed building it because of the war.
They
And
need
there was
those
like this,
munitions.
yeah, well, there was like a big tanker of molasses coming in. I'm like, oh, gotta build it, gotta get it done, to get this tanker in here. And so they cut a lot of corners.
Did they use this tank for munitions?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the main use for the molasses in this tank was to distill down into alcohol for munitions.
I do like that at this point in time, the United States wasn't involved in World War One. So they wanted to.
We had declared war.
Oh, okay.
When this was 1915 when the tank was built,
Okay.
and they rushed it to build up munitions and whatnot for the war effort.
Crunch existed even back then.
Fortunes were made on molasses. Like,
What a sweet way to make a buck, gentlemen. I'm just going to be
Molasses
rubbing.
Baron? Like,
Oh,
that's just crazy to me.
there is a molasses baron. We'll talk about that.
He wears a linen
I don't know if
suit
I'd call him a
And has
baron,
a hat, like a
but-
fedora. And he's like, you understand when you run the molasses game, there's only one way to go, and that's the
Now
molasses.
he's running town, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, or USIA, as it was known, was the alcohol distilling company that owned this tank. The company that had the actual tank that was under the umbrella of the USIA was the Purity Distilling Company, and that's the one that was in Boston. And yeah, they looked after the tank and pumping it full of molasses and then taking a pipeline straight from the tank to a factory that was nearby. So it was a good place to build it because the factory was right there, so you didn't really have to transport it.
Yeah.
Right, that's why they wanted it right there.
None of those long molasses pipelines.
Right. The thing was, though, is where they built it was in a very congested, poor neighborhood at the time in Boston, where a lot of Italian immigrants lived, a lot of Jewish immigrants lived, and it was a very working class area. Everybody knew everybody. Neighbors cared about each other over there. So this was a tight knit, poor community that this was in.
Every spring they'd have the spring festival underneath the molasses vat.
They'd like
Instead of a maypole, it's just the vat.
Yeah.
They have a string of ribbon around.
like tie ribbons around it.
The molasses vat's the mascot of the city. Yeah. Look at it shining and proud. It's just full of old. It's like concentrated sweet old timey molasses.
Yeah, and people would straight up just eat molasses back then. They loved molasses. Like
Monsters.
kids. The molasses tank that they did build was 50 feet high, 90 feet in diameter,
It's a big boy.
and could hold an astonishing 2.3 million gallons of molasses.
Oh, that's a couple gallons.
That's 24 million pounds of molasses.
Sweet black gold Texas tea.
Texas tea? What?
Isn't that
The original
That's oil.
Boston Tea Party.
That's oil.
Yeah. That's
potato,
sweet.
potato.
So is the clear molasses the superior molasses?
The clear molasses is what's called first molasses. It's the first byproduct of the refining of sugar cane, and it has the most sugar in it. So it's the most sweet molasses. And it's used for like syrups and things like that. And yeah, the medium second molasses or dark molasses is like the stuff you would use for like gingerbread. It's the stuff you buy at the store, like the dark stuff. And then there's that like awful, disgusting blackstrap molasses.
It's only for
like
the rum.
very bitter, and there's like almost no sugar in it.
Yeah.
And that's for tarring your roof.
It may as well be.
Yeah.
I have no use for it.
It's for punishing your
The
children.
tar fumes are making me dizzy. Yeah, they'll do that.
Then there's like a Victorian like
Simpsons
treacle, like things like that.
Yeah, probably
like-
for making sweets for your children.
Well, like they'd like put on crackers or some shit, in the Victorian era.
I just feel like they all exist for depending on how naughty your turn of the century child's being. You give them that version of molasses.
This is a very old timey story.
It's
in
old
every-
timey. So the tank was built on 529 Commercial Street in Boston's North End. Yeah, at the time was an industrial area with loading docks, factories, tenements, and a fire station.
Oh,
It's a
good.
little fire station that was nearby. One thing that was super crazy is there was right before this disaster, there was an influenza epidemic that killed a bunch of people, especially in poor neighborhoods like this one, and like orphaned a bunch of children. And like the crazy thing about this, and yeah, the economy wasn't doing well, jobs were scarce, so were good wages,
But-
especially for immigrants.
On the flip side, Boston, what is it? The Red Sox had won their first World
They
Series
had,
ever.
with Babe Ruth.
With Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
And we had just got out of World War One. So
Well,
people
in
were
1919,
feeling-
yeah.
Yeah, we're feeling
Yeah.
pretty good. We got out of the war literally the November before, because this happened January of 1919.
But right after the war, there was an economic depression.
Yeah.
It didn't last very long, but there was an economic depression.
So you get a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, you know? You win a World Series and economic depression.
Yeah,
And
and-
also, orphan children, and then that would later be murdered by a wave of molasses.
Because they would go up to this molasses tank, and
Yeah.
because the molasses tank would leak like a sieve, like from the second it was built. And we'll kind of talk about that later, but they'd go over there and they would like pick buckets of it up and like put sticks in it, and then like lick it off the stick.
So
like,
it's a
take it
poor
back home.
lollipop,
I
basically.
met
Yeah.
with a bunch of street urchins.
Oh,
just
yeah.
lost their parents to the flu.
Yeah,
living
and they're
off
like
a street.
please living off of street molasses.
Yes.
If it wasn't for
like-
knowing that tank was going to burst and kill everyone, I'd be like, what a time to be alive. Just being shoeless and illiterate, playing stickball and eating street molasses.
I'm gonna sorry.
You want me to do a
I'm gonna
dance for
pick
you
that.
instead?
I'm gonna pick that rich man's pocket right so I get this street molasses.
Yeah, please, sir. Can
I
have
don't
some
know
more?
what accent that is.
Yeah,
by the
I know,
way.
right?
It was kind of-
Orphan.
Yeah. Okay. fair
That
enough.
was orphan accent.
I
like
certainly
it.
can't do a Boston accent. I can't do it.
There's a reason why Harry Potter and Batman sound like that.
That's what Batman sounds like.
It's an Harry Potter
Grown ass
sounds like.
Batman.
I'm Batman.
I'm gonna get you, Joker.
Yeah, I'm gonna sweep your chimney.
It's like a cross between Cockney and transatlantic.
Something like that. Yeah. Before, during, and after the war, there was this increased violent activity of Italian anarchists that
Cool.
were way against the war, and they were like committing like bombings around the city, across the nation. Actually, like
In Boston?
in Boston, a police
Punk as
station.
fuck.
Yeah, it truly is. A police station was bombed in Boston, close to where this tank was. in New York City.
Hey guys, you're bombing a little close to the molasses tank.
Yeah. Well, and the molasses tank was a target because it was a place where they would basically make bullets and
You're
stuff.
like, I'm gonna fuck up that molasses tank.
It's the source of their war machine, and also the source of their deliciousness, and also, well, not their booze.
And what the poor children pray to at night. Please, molasses god.
Bring my parents back.
Bring my parents. The anarchists scared a lot of people, so they put a night watchman there in front of the tank.
Oh, but this guy
to guard
wasn't a
the tank.
booze hound.
Yeah, he had to have had an old dog and was always falling asleep at the job like the Maytag man.
I picture him like twirling a baton.
Oh, yeah.
And he's
Oh, yeah.
like, "Howdy, ma'am."
Yeah.
He's a real nice guy, hardcore alcoholic, and took his job way too seriously.
Yeah. Oh, no, beats the shit out of the kids, never arrests them, but always takes them home and then says they're good kids, just misguided.
Takes him back to the orphanage.
Also-
there were no kids.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah.
Stealing that molasses.
By the
hey.
way, to be a newspaper writer at that exact moment in time, you're just like, oh man, how many Italian puns can I put in these headlines? Like, Mamma Mia, another bombing. Holy
Jeez.
ravioli. They're trying to burn down the molasses vat. They would probably be way more racist because it was 1919.
Yeah.
It was a different time.
And they were very racist against Italian immigrants as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't even know about Muslims back then. How are racists supposed to be racist against those guys? They're like, we got to find other white people to be racist against.
Yeah. And
All right.
they were like,
Let's really split some hairs.
yeah, right. As I said, the building standards of the time, we didn't have certain technologies at the time. Like we didn't know about welding at the time. So what they would do is they'd take like sheets of metal and they'd rivet them together and
State
call
of the
it
art.
good. Because it was rushed, like the type of steel was way too thin and the rivets would leak, and it leaked the second they put molasses in this thing.
How did they fix the problems with the leaking molasses, Jerry? How did they calm the public's nerves when they saw molasses leaking from the tank?
A couple of ways. The first way was they caulked it.
Got
They would caulk all the cracks, but it didn't help. It'd still leak out. There was a lot of workers, including a man named Isaac Gonzalez, who was sort of a general man. Like he would load it, he would unload it, he just sort of worked generally there. He would like bring back like metal flakes and be like, hey, when I work down here, like this metal flakes off and like hits me in the head, and like big metal flakes, and he's like, it makes groaning sounds and stuff, and they're like, like it makes disturbing sounds when I'm around it.
That's just the old molasses tank groaning. Don't give it any mind.
So what they did, like they ignored him, and they're like, he's crazy, because he got really paranoid, and he'd be like, and he'd stay awake at night, and he would leave in the middle of the night, and he would go down to the molasses tank and sleep in front of it, just in case there was any problem. Maybe he could warn people that like there's a giant leak, and that part is what like disturbed them. The fact that he was sleeping in front, they're like, you're crazy, and so they were like, get out of here, and then they're like, let's paint it brown so no one notices anymore. So they painted the thing brown.
There
It's
you go.
ridiculous.
I don't see what's wrong with sleeping in the warming glow of the molasses vat.
Turn of the century problems required turn of the century solutions.
I have a theory, and I'm gonna say what it is. I'm not gonna justify it, and I'm gonna let the story speak for itself. The molasses is malicious and sentient.
Yes.
I mean, maybe.
So it's the blob.
It's venom, dude.
It's the blob. I like to think of it as the blob.
Yeah.
No, it's a venom. It's a vat of venom symbiote.
Yeah, it just needs to find a host. And I didn't know that symbiote was so sweet.
It is actually.
And nutritious.
That's a canon Marvel fact.
Yeah.
That symbiote tastes.
Yeah.
It's very sweet. It tastes like black tar molasses. Black
Black tar. Black
strap.
tar.
Black tar
heroin.
molasses get your ass
It tastes
fucked,
like
dog.
black tar heroin. It's the only molasses I ever eat.
This is disgusting.
It tastes
Can I have
like
another
black strap
bite?
molasses and gets you high like black tar heroin.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. No wonder
good
they
time.
loved it so much.
Coming from Purdue Pharmaceutical.
Well, and actually, molasses was thought about as a like a cure-all, because it did have a lot of nutrients in it, and they'd be like, 1 spoonful of molasses a day is what I need.
It'll cure what ails you.
That sounds true.
Yeah,
I believe
it was,
that.
Yeah. There was like a lot of commercials where like stars would endorse it, like well into the 40s and 50s.
Oh yeah. Sinatra.
Yeah, they were all just eating molasses all the time.
Yeah. Sammy Davis
disgusting.
Jr.
Yeah.
Love molasses.
It's good for hangovers. It's good when you need to, I don't know, wash down your spousal abuse with something sweet.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the man in charge of building this monstrosity was a man named Arthur P. Gell.
It's gel.
Yeah, that was his name. Jell. Gell. Arthur P. Gell.
Like a gel like molasses?
Like like a non-Newtonian fluid.
Maybe.
Like gel.
Yes.
Like goo.
Like goo.
What was his name again?
Arthur P. Gell.
Arthur P. Goo.
He was nowhere near the molasses tank because,
He knew that it was fucked.
I think in the back of his mind he knew that it was... It was on its last legs.
Oh, he's like Mads Mikkelsen from Rogue One. He built it with a critical flaw on purpose so it could be destroyed by the rebels.
Or just by its own poor construction.
No, I think he knew nothing about building. He was an accountant.
Oh.
He knew nothing about building these tanks.
I like to think that he built a trench that if you shot a torpedo in, it would blow up the molasses tank.
But the molasses would go everywhere and kill
What's that
everyone.
from?
That's what he...
Is that
Rogue One. Star
Tracks.
Star
Trek.
Traps. Trapezius muscles.
Nice.
It's got Mads Mikkelsen in there.
So he's a doofus, and they were like, design this thing, and he was like, I'll do my best, but I'm not living
Yeah.
in the same town as it. It's probably going to break.
He was a long ways away in his
Yeah.
own little office, but the whole time he was like, "It's a sound structure. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. I'm moving to Boise.
Yeah. Boise."
I was looking at you. What am I going to do?
Okay. Right. He sort of put the blinders on. I mean, Isaac Gonzalez was not the only person to mention, hey, this doesn't seem safe.
Yeah.
But he was just like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Dude, you got to listen to your boy Isaac. He seems like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah. Back in 1915, when the tank was being built, Gel had been put in a sticky situation. See what I did there?
Now that's what I call a sticky situation.
It was a bit of a sticky situation. By the USIA in getting the molasses tank operational on time to fulfill their war contracts. It was a bungle job. He oversaw a bungle job and didn't want to admit it.
They botched it.
The Bungle Boys biffed it.
Yeah.
It was a Bungle Boy botch job.
Bungle Boy Biff Burger.
So it was a common knowledge to everyone that worked anywhere near this tank that when it was full, being filled, or being emptied, that it would make these horrible sounds. It would just go...
Sentient molasses.
That's the old groaning of the molasses
Yeah.
fat.
The children
like my
haven't been
ex-girlfriend.
praying to it, and it's getting angry.
It requires a sacrifice.
Yeah. Human sacrifice. Just one of those orphan kids. It's like, yeah, you like molasses? I heard this stuff will kill you.
I heard this stuff will kill you.
It'll be the death of you.
You have the right to remain dead. I don't
Yeah.
know. There's a billion ways you could go with it.
Yeah.
You know?
But now, yeah, it was 1919, the war was over, the anarchist behavior was at an all-time high, even the tank was actually threatened, like, somebody called Isaac Gonzalez, and they were like, I'm gonna blow up the tank with dynamite, and he was like, oh no, and he called up Arthur Gell, and he was like, someone's gonna blow up the tank, and he's like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
He's
Which
like,
is not a Boston accent.
he's like,
He's from Jersey.
I made it bomb-proof
It's like
and
Chicago.
bulletproof. And he's like, you designed it that way? He's like, no, I just, it'll hold.
It'll be fine. Everything
good.
will be fine.
Everything will be fine.
Numbers, it's fine.
Yeah,
It's fine. Everything will be fine. He's sitting there with a gun in his mouth back home.
So,
I'm not painting it another color.
I'm not painting it green here.
Yeah.
If only it had racing stripes on it.
So it looks like it's tearing ass. So the morning of January 15th, 1919 was unusually warm for the winter. And this happens all the time in Boston where they'll have like a really cold day and then like they like call it like the winter defrost, and they'll have like a day that's like in the 40s, and it's like incredibly warm. And
Kind of cold.
yeah, and so like the day before January 15th, they filled the tank to near capacity, and it was really cold. But then on January 15th, they filled it the rest of the way up, but it was with warmer molasses.
Uh-oh.
So it combined, and there was a fermentation process sort of happening, and it kind of made the walls brittle.
There's a bit of a tornado in the molasses.
Yeah, it's moving around, it's expanding.
Yeah.
So was Gonzalez pulling a Matt Johnstone and just wearing shorts the whole time that day?
I certainly hope so.
It was
Yeah, it's
like
like 2
Millhouse
degrees
with
and
his
he's
high
like-
water.
Yeah.
I hope John Stone
Hey,
is
wait,
listening
they're
to this.
working.
Yeah, his Millhouse is like high water pants.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, everything's coming up Millhouse.
I'm telling you, it's bringing a lot of Simpsons quotes out of me. This is a very Simpsons story.
It truly is.
This is what could have happened in Springfield if it didn't actually happen in Lives for Lost.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and people didn't, die and lose family members.
Yeah.
It would have been hilarious, and Hans Moleman would have been like, "Oh no," and floated by.
The molasses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying boo earns.
Yeah. That morning, everyone was sort of, as 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock rolled around, people started going to lunch. And 2 children who were going to lunch / gathering firewood, like scraps of wood they just found because, again,
They're
economic
dirty
depression.
Yeah, and dirty street children.
Yeah, and they were picking up molasses from the tank like they normally
Street
do.
molasses, street chunks.
Yeah.
But they were street chunks. They were technically trespassing.
Yeah.
One guy at the near the tank was like telling the kids like, "You shouldn't be doing
Was this the same guy with the billy club? He was like,
No, different guy.
You
The
stay away
guy
from
that
that-
actually worked there.
stay away from that tank, you see.
Yeah, stay away from that old tank. Yeah,
You don't know what might happen to you. You
Yeah.
have brittle bones.
yeah. 2 children in particular. I'm going to butcher these names as I
cool.
as I normally do.
As you're wont to do.
Yeah, as I want. Pasquale Iontosca and Maria Destasio, both of them were 10 years old. They were in the vicinity of the tank. Yeah, they were sneaking around trying to get some of that molasses. And about at 12:30, people said that they could hear a deep rumbling sound, as if an elevated train, which was nearby, was going over. But that's not what it was. And then all of a sudden, there was this big boom, and then a pop, 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 pop sound. And what that was it was the rivets firing off of the tank.
Literal
Cool.
bullets.
These things were firing in all directions, and the tank burst in all directions, all the way up.
Oh no.
And I guess it sounded like a machine gun, and then just a big bomb. It sounded like a bomb. It was just like boom. And at 35 miles an hour, the molasses, this non-Newtonian fluid, burst out and obliterated everything in its path. It was, some said, some people exaggerate how high the wall of molasses was, but it was estimated around a 25-foot wall of molasses
Just
washed over them.
Delicious wave coming at you at 35 miles an hour. People that were hit by it said it felt like they were like being knocked over by like a linebacker.
Oh yeah, like it was, again, worse than water.
The molasses
Way worse
was
than
angry that day, my friends.
Yes, and it like knocked people back,
It wanted blood, and it was
Yeah.
gonna have
Yeah.
it. I was gonna say the bigger chunks of the vat that were flung in the
Yeah.
explosion. One of them destroyed the rail that held up the elevated train. And the train was like near. It was a near miss.
Well, because there was a guy, like, it had just happened, there was a train coming, and there was a guy that worked for the elevated train, and he stood up on top of it, and he waved his arms frantically, and he was like, "Stop! Stop! The thing is being destroyed by molasses!" And they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
And they stopped right before, like, it went down.
Do you have a shorter warning? Molasses. Yes, we love molasses.
We all love it. This is old-timey stuff.
Like, don't worry, there's plenty of molasses on the train. Molasses for everyone.
Yeah.
So a Boston police patrolman, Frank McManus, was walking his normal beat, saw it happening, ran over to a police call box, because back in those days there was a little box that said police on it.
I like
Opened
Doctor
it up,
Who.
and he opened it up and he was like, no, it's more like a box, like on a stick. And like you opened it up and you had a direct line with the police department. And he probably spoke the most, the strangest words he would probably ever say to an operator who probably heard the strangest thing she could possibly ever hear. And that was, and I quote, "Send all available rescue vehicles and personnel immediately. There's a wave of molasses coming down Commercial Street."
Oh, wave of molasses.
Yeah.
Imagine he's Irish.
Hey, it's a wave of
I mean,
molasses, you see?
McManus, come on.
Yeah, he's an old Irish guy.
Well, and isn't like partway through his warning, it became garbled and got cut off?
Oh, yeah, because it
That's
for
a wave
him.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
It flattened buildings. It straight up moved.
Oh, straight smushed him.
Yeah, it moved the firehouse off of its foundation.
Holy shit.
It swept boxcars and people off the tracks into the harbor that was right next to it, like into the water.
Oh, not the harbor.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, the harbor was lousy with molasses that day.
Oh, and people.
Yeah.
You know.
I think adjusted for inflation, the molasses flood caused $100 million of damage.
Oh, it costs more than that. Well, as we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, you know, you got your primary sources. I got mine. I heard adjusted for inflation, it was $100 million.
$100 million in damage to property.
Yes.
But that number will go up, as we'll see later.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how much of that molasses landed into the harbor?
There's no solid number because it went out in in a 360-degree direction.
Did it float out to sea?
I don't know.
Some of those fish got some sweet ass molasses.
I'm sure they did.
Well, I was just thinking of this
tiger sharks?
that sweetener for the tea that is obviously in the Boston Harbor.
Oh, I'm sure that it would have made a fine tea.
Yeah. Well,
once that molasses finally mixed with the
tea from the Boston Tea Party,
Yeah.
you got
A
some
century earlier.
Yeah. You got a real sweet herbalaceous harbor.
Yeah.
It's delicious. You could just drink it. It's good.
yeah.
It's like, not bad.
Yeah. Now, pardon me while
It's
I
a
vomit.
bit sweet. Yeah. It absolutely ruined a part of the track for the elevated trains. It took minutes and seconds for the molasses to make the area look like a bombed-out war zone. Like, any of the World War I veterans that were working around there, like, that was the best way they could describe it. Like, it looked like just complete war zone.
They should have used molasses in the war instead of making any munitions.
Just toss
Drop
that.
molasses on people.
Toss molasses at the Germans.
And the people of Boston are busy at home making molasses bombs for the war effort. Can we talk about the boy who surfed on molasses?
Oh, we're going to talk about that here in a second.
Oh,
okay.
A teen wolf.
Yeah.
That's not what
Escape
happened.
from L.A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But 2.3 million gallons of molasses covered the north end. It was waist deep in places. It was knee deep in other places. There were firemen inside the firehouse. One of them was a man named George Leahy. He was trapped underneath a pool table in the
he died.
firehouse. Well, and what happened is, like, if you could imagine, like, a pool table sitting on top of your chest, and you're doing everything you can to sort of keep your head, like your neck and your head, out of the molasses so you don't drown. And so for hours he sat there trying to keep his head out of it, but it was so exhausting that he eventually had to give up and he drowned in the molasses. And his last words, I guess, were, this is not a direct quote, but it was something along the lines of, "Oh God, I'm going. It's over."
Yeah.
It was
It's
something like
weird,
that.
like, I'm finished.
Yeah,
It was
and-
like something along those
I'm
lines.
done
yeah.
for.
Yeah, and
I'm
like,
a goner.
other people that survived that were in the firehouse that could hear him say this, they were like trying to like, "It's okay, George, we're all doing it." You know, they were all trapped as well.
Yeah.
And then they just didn't hear him anymore.
Molasses
Yeah.
got him.
His mouth was full of molasses.
Another child somehow, luckily, grabbed a light pole and was holding onto it for dear life, and his mother in a nearby building was watching, and he was trying to scream out for her, and she couldn't hear what he's saying because his mouth and nose and everything was just being stuffed with molasses. And she didn't know who it was. She was like, there's a child out there surfing on the molasses. And it's like, that's your kid, lady.
And in that moment, she felt so much pride for her son's ability to surf upon the molasses.
He was pretty messed up too, but he survived.
He starred in several Golden Age films under the serial franchise, The Molasses Boy. And they were in cinemas. They inspired the nation, and they got us out of a pretty tight spot. You know,
a sticky situation.
Yeah. Oh man, it was right there. Actually, all of that I made up. That boy did not star in any movies.
Those Molasses Boy films really lifted the nation's spirits after the Great Molasses Flood.
And it wasn't just people. Like it include like livestock, hogs, and horses that
so
were
many
there.
horses.
So many horses.
I think in the eyewitness testimonies they talked about the horses looking like flies trapped in fly paper.
Yeah, and during the cleanup, people said that they could hear like a distant pop, 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 and what it was people walking around and shooting suffering horses in the head to spare them. Yeah. Pretty nasty, because there's no way they could get them out of there.
Yeah.
Because they ate too much molasses.
Force-fed in a way.
Yeah. A horse can't, work for the Pony Express once it's reached a certain molasses quotient. Or quota.
Yeah.
Quota's the word. My bad.
Martin Cloherty, or Cloherty, I'm unsure how to pronounce that name. He was actually a well-known middleweight boxer. He worked like a night shift of being a referee now of boxing bouts. He was asleep at this time, and he was awoken by the blast of molasses in his house, and it was fairly close.
Molasses?
Good try.
Yeah.
Molasses.
He said that the molasses knocked him out of bed, and that he was fully submerged before he realized, oh my god, I'm not in the water, I'm in fucking molasses.
That has got to be a hell of a way to wake up.
And he climbed back up on his bed, and he's like floating in this molasses, and he's like, ugh. And he sees his sister struggling. He rescues his sister. His mother, who was outside hanging the laundry, he didn't know it at the time, but she was gone instantly. He also had a brother, Stephen, who was mentally handicapped, and he saved him as well. His brother Stephen was thrown from an upstairs window out into the molasses below. Stephen would have...
The sugary grave below.
Stephen would have permanent PTSD from it, although they didn't know what PTSD really was back then.
Molasses shock.
Yeah, something like that. Paired with the vague understanding of his mental condition and the PTSD and how they would react together, the psychological help of the time had no idea really what to do with him, and he would have these violent outbursts where he would accuse nurses and hospital staff of trying to throw him out the window into a giant pile of molasses.
In his defense, they were.
But Martin had to eventually put his brother in a sanatorium because of this, where he later died.
Molasses madness.
Yeah, that's so fucking mean.
He had that molasses madness.
That's so tragic that he died this way.
It is very tragic.
And really quick, back to the kid. There's a article from. It was written for the Smithsonian in 1983. They were covering the tragedy. The excerpt is. Anthony DeStasio, walking homeward with his sisters from the Michelangelo School, was picked up by the wave and carried, tumbling on its crest, almost as though he were surfing. Then he grounded, and the molasses rolled him like a pebble as the wave diminished. He heard his mother call his name and couldn't answer. His throat was so clogged with the smothering goo. He passed out and then opened his eyes to find 3 of his 4 sisters staring at him. Yeah. I just clogged with goo.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been Bart Simpson in the Simpsons episode.
Yeah. He would have been like, don't have a cow, man. I'm just surfing on this goo.
Cowabunga.
you said 3 of his 4 sisters. His 4th sister, Maria DeStasio, is standing right next to the tank. She was killed instantly, and so was Pasquale. Their bodies were so disfigured that even their own parents couldn't identify them. They were identified by the clothes that they had on that day, which I can't fucking imagine. That's so tragic.
They couldn't even use dental records because all the cavities from the molasses.
Yeah.
I don't think
And they
there
couldn't
was
do
dental
fingerprints
records
because of the molasses.
Italian immigrants at the time.
What I said was insensitive.
Yes. Yes, it was.
But I knew it, and I went for it.
Talk about a sticky
And I have-
situation.
Nice.
We'll see how people feel about it before I decide whether I feel bad about it.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
That's how this world works, right?
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm sorry now
Yeah.
that you guys were offended.
I said some things about the molasses flood that were insensitive, and I'm truly sorry from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah.
You know, we might as well just record these right now.
Yeah. And with the night coming on and the rescue efforts and in full swing, it got cooler. And with that, the molasses became more solid, and it became much more difficult to get people out of it. There was one man, he was a stonecutter, John Barry. He was pinned against a wall in unimaginable pain for hours and hours before rescuers could literally cut him out of where he was. And like one guy had to go in on his hands and knees and crawl in. And he, in one hand, he had a syringe with morphine in it. In another hand, he had a bottle of whiskey. And he kept like poking him with the morphine and like, here, drink this. And so he would like go in and out of consciousness, and like he'd wake up and they're like, you know, in various degrees of getting him the hell out of there.
Santa?
That sounds like an awesome party right
Yeah, right?
Fuck.
He's like, I am the Viper Room.
I guess John Barry, he left for work that day with brown hair and had white hair as he was
Holy
rescued.
shit.
The molasses spooks.
It was that level of pain and stress and sheer awfulness.
Does molasses freeze?
It doesn't totally freeze.
Yeah, it kind of
It just
probably
gets really
thick.
hard.
It gets
and
thicker,
thick.
probably.
Yeah, and knowing that this is January and it may have been a warm day, at night it had to have been way worse.
Yep.
My dad used to say the phrase, you're slower than molasses running uphill in January.
Well,
I swear,
that's a
my
good
whole
point.
life he said
That's
that.
a good point.
Do you think it's from this? Like,
Maybe.
wherever he got it from. I'm not saying he made that up.
Well, molasses was like a big deal back in the old-timey days.
Yeah.
Like, candy was molasses.
Like, you want candy? Here's some
Here's
molasses,
some
kid.
molasses. Here's some disgusting molasses.
Yeah.
boy, thank you.
And black licorice.
Yeah.
You boys like your molasses and your black licorice? They're like, yeah,
I like black
yeah.
I
licorice.
think red licorice came out
black
and people
licorice.
were like, oh my god, we've been doing it wrong for so long.
Yeah, dude.
This is clearly better.
It's objectively better.
And then you get the hollowed out Twizzlers and you use them as a straw in your sody pop when you go to see a
bueno,
picture.
bueno.
Oh,
And you
that's-
drink that beer with the Skittles floating in it.
oh, Skittlebrow.
Hell
Can we count the Simpsons references that I
Yeah,
make in
I
this
know.
episode?
I think we're up to 45 at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. The number of dead, all told, was 21, and over 150 injured. It was horrible. Absolutely horrible. They didn't find people, you know, for weeks afterward. They took some people out of the harbor that had been swept out into the water.
A lot of that 21 was probably in the harbor, right?
Not necessarily. A lot of people in their homes that were just obliterated. You know, that were trapped underneath things, or
I guess if you're
In
inside and
between things.
molasses flows in, what are you going to do?
yeah. I mean, there's some people survived that, but
That's why Zach's bunker has that molasses escape route that we made.
yes, exactly.
And all the people who didn't make it were encased in a thick candy shell like so many M&Ms in the wind.
Yeah.
Oh, delicious.
The sweetest carbonite.
Talk about sweet release. Am I right, guys?
That's good.
Arthur Gell, who was, you know, a ways away, he actually rushed to the disaster area
I
and
hope he
tried.
fell on his fucking sword.
Well, he tried to get through. He tried explaining, like, I am the man who made this thing, but like everyone was like, get out of here, and he was like, okay. And then like he got called by the USIA, and he was like, what do I do? And they're like, don't tell anyone anything.
Yeah.
And they instantly lawyered up.
Yeah.
So he stopped saying anything until there was an investigation.
Well, the truth is, like, he was paid by a company to make this.
Yeah.
And they were like, hustle up, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, make it shoddy, bro. And he was like, all right, if you want shoddy, hire an accountant to do an engineer's job.
Nice.
And, yeah.
He's like, if you want a shitty made tank, Jell's your man.
So the USIA instantly said that it had to have been a bomb. Like, it blew up, it had been filled to capacity a couple of times under different circumstances is what they were missing. But, there were bomb threats, there had been all these anarchists that were threatening to blow it up, so they were like, it's a bomb, it's not our fault.
They had all the ammunition that they needed in order to build that argument.
Oh, yeah.
These are the bad guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, the anarchists especially, everything was ripe to blame everything on them. But you know what? No one was buying it.
That's good.
Because everyone had heard the noises, the groans, and the sounds that came from this tank. And the fact that it leaked more than any other storage tank, and it was bigger than a lot of them, it was clear that it was a problem.
Everyone knew that Molasses was sentient.
Yeah, and it was
I guess
groaning to be released from its prison. So it was like, I was meant to become munitions, and if I can't kill abroad, I'll kill at home.
I like how it became a song. Like, this is a musical.
Yeah.
The Great Molasses Flood.
Oh,
the
as a musical,
Oh.
I would watch that musical.
Yeah.
I truly would. That would be a great musical.
A rock opera.
and it's fucking Tim Curry as the
As the Molasses. And Tim Curry as the Molasses.
I mean, he's way too old now, but
He's too old to
it
play the
would have been
Molasses.
it would have been perfect, and you know it.
You put him in a motion capture suit. He does the whole
I
thing.
think he can't even walk anymore.
Well,
like, he's fucked.
There's something wrong with him.
Well, then get Andy
It's tragic.
Serkis.
I'm just saying, in
Yeah,
the
Andy
90s, he would have been perfect.
Yeah.
Andy Serkis in a mocap suit, so he could really get the physicality of the Molasses down.
Spraying in all directions.
Yeah, he's like doing a whole move.
He's like crawling
You
on the
guys
floor.
can't see it at home, but I'm doing like a.
Yeah, he's like crawling on the floor, and he's like, I really get into the character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but can he sing?
He might be able to.
Probably.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I think Steve Martin should be the fireman.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Like in Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just cast this as if it was the 90s.
Yeah. It's
But let's
easier.
finish the story first.
Yeah. 119 separate claims were filed against USIA, which was a record. At no point in history was there something bigger than this, as far as a case. One judge, though, in the initial investigation, actually astonishingly blamed the people that lived around it for the disaster, saying that if it wasn't a bomb, then they should have insisted that the tank be built properly. But, dude, if Arthur Gell didn't know how to build the tank properly, then what the hell do all of these immigrants know about building a goddamn tank?
Well, and you assume when you see something like that.
As usual, it's the immigrants' fault.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like, you see any industrial object, you assume that somebody was paid well and knew what they were doing.
I mean, in this day and age especially.
Well, yeah.
Well, and this kind of changed that, too.
Now we have all those molasses regulations that are holding us back.
In any case...
Trump will fix that.
yeah, right.
Deregulate the molasses market.
Well, and of course, no one would listen to a guy with the last name Gonzalez, even modern day.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine 100 years ago. Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah, the Mexican Revolution was going on at this time.
There you go.
So, there you go.
Viva la
We did
raza.
4 episodes about it.
Yeah, you heard them. I
You
hope
better
you did.
have.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to them.
Those are better than this one.
Well, time will tell.
This
okay?
one's pretty sweet, though. I don't know.
Hey.
Oh, I see what you
Nice.
did there.
Talk about a sticky situation, guys.
God damn it.
God.
We need a counter on
We've
that.
already
Ding.
worn out our own joke. In any case, the defense paid experts, I'm doing air quotes, experts, to say what they needed them to say at trial. It was a bomb. Had to have been a bomb. People saw smoke. But it's like, dude, you're in a harbor where there's all these factories. Where did you see smoke? You saw smoke everywhere.
Yeah.
It made a boom sound.
I
yeah,
imagine it
probably
was a bit
sounded
of a
like
smoky situation.
that. Yeah.
Well, and also you're in an industrial area. There's like smoke and booming noises kind of constantly.
But this is, I mean, it was a big one. Sure, it was a big
Yeah.
boom. I get it.
Big
but-
bada boom in the cab.
But they had no evidence for a bomb. Not one. Like, there was a explosive expert that was like, well, what accompanies a blast of this magnitude would be blown out windows from the sound. But this did not actually exist in the way it does with a big explosion. Like, windows were knocked out, yeah, by molasses, but not by a flood. Or not by a blast of dynamite, you know? And they also were like, are you telling me that a guy walked up to this giant tank in the middle of the day, because bombings never happen in the middle of the goddamn day,
Yeah, they happen at nighttime.
somehow put dynamite, enough to blow this thing up, into the tank, walked away, and somehow was safe from the blast? Is that what you're telling me? Are you telling me this
Yeah.
happened? Come on.
Also,
Well,
like,
I wanna
how
say
could
that-
the wick stay lit?
Yeah.
if it's
Well,
inside.
Well,
the
because
thick molasses?
they actually did tests on this. They went to like universities. The USIA paid for tests to happen, and the explosive expert actually did say, like, if you tossed a stick of lit dynamite into a vat of molasses, would it stay lit? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, it would. So yeah, that
You
is
could
true.
wouldn't
You could
smother
throw,
it with
you could throw dynamite in the water.
You can,
Yeah.
you can. The wick is
Or the fuse.
the fuse is so conductive that it will stay lit.
I mean,
And
I would
this is
have.
why I live in a bunker, because that
Yes.
shit's super scary.
Yeah,
You would think that there would be a
Yeah.
really long
We know.
fuse, like a primer cord that would go all the way out, and then the vandal, the assassin.
and
I
no
guess,
one saw him do it, huh?
Yeah, and he'd have the plunger, and he jumps, and his legs go in the air, and then he pushes down. Yeah,
I
This
mean, it was
makes no
Wile E.
sense.
Coyote, obviously.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
imagine
Wile E.
more of
Coyote
a,
would have been caught in the blast.
Yosemite Sam.
yeah. I mean, who would have thought that Molasses could be a vandal, a burglar, a murderer, and I'm gonna posit a rapist. It's getting in the holes,
It does feel
whether you
like-
want it to or not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Another hero of the story, the counsel for the plaintiffs, Damon Hall, he was the one who, like, grilled everybody. He was like, come on. The bomb expert, he on the stand during cross-examination, he was like, so when you did your initial investigation on this, you said it couldn't have been a bomb because of the lack of all of this bomb evidence that must exist if a bomb went off. He was like, yeah. He's like, so are you telling me that sitting right here on this stand is the first time in your life that you've ever said that it was a bomb? And he's like, yeah.
Got him.
Like, he picked them apart. Like, he
Yeah.
picked all these
Cool.
people apart.
He picked his bones clean as if he was a slow roasted, barbecued piece of pork that might have been basted with a molasses-based barbecue sauce.
Pig on a spit.
Yum yum.
So this is a great quote. I had to include this because this was in response to a remark that the defense for USIA said that when they were building the thing, if it wasn't like up to snuff, no one would have said anything because it was like an unwritten thing. You just don't say anything. And Damon Hall has this great scathing quote. He says he scoffed at it and he goes, "If a streetcar operator says, I ordered axles that were sufficient to carry my car and not break, but there is a rule among car builders that they can furnish something less than I ordered, and I accepted the axles under this rule. True, they are not what I ordered, and true, they are too light, but that it is a rule that car builders follow." And then he looked to the judge and he said, how long would the Supreme Court take to consider a defense of that kind? That some unwritten rule that, oh yeah, it's not what you ordered, it's not actually up to snuff, but it's
We have an
fine.
unspoken rule about shoddy workmanship.
Yeah. It's bullshit.
That's-
It's such a weak argument.
I blame the unions on that one.
Yeah, especially at that time.
Those
Exactly.
Teamsters, there was a lot of Teamsters down there.
Oh, there were, yes.
I blame the immigrants.
Yeah,
As
a
a
lot like how they did.
Die-hard Trump follower,
they-
as I am.
They actually talked about the children who died.
Oh, will
in the
somebody
blast.
please think of the children?
But you know what the
Simpsons
defense?
reference.
You know what the defense said? They said, they were trespassing. We shouldn't defend trespassers.
That's a good point.
Which is fucking terrible.
That's great.
I mean, to be fair, they're orphans in Boston, probably chain smoking.
Yeah.
They were just trying to get some molasses and firewood.
Some of that street molasses.
Yeah.
You gotta feed.
But the best part of the entire trial was when Damon Hall finally got to grill Arthur Gell.
Oh, Jill.
Yeah.
Let's just see if his testimony gels.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, got him.
That is good.
He asked him if he knew anything about constructing molasses tanks. Gell said no. He asked him if he had asked anyone how to build a molasses storage tank. Gell said no. Hall asked if the tank was tested first with water. Gell said it had, but they only put 6 inches in the tank because they were like, it's gonna take too long if we fill this whole thing full of water to see if it
6
leaks.
inches.
So they only
seems
put
enough.
something that
It's
would
a good
fill
size. It's a good
something that
size.
would fill 2.3 million gallons of molasses. They only put 6 inches of water in it and called it good. That is mind-boggling. They're like, it would have taken too long. But Damon Hall was like, did you know that there was a water main right underneath you and it would have taken a fraction of the time that you're actually telling me? It wouldn't have taken weeks. It would have taken, maybe a day, hours maybe. And he's like, no, I didn't look into that.
So I'd imagine that they got taken to the cleaners and had to pay out all those families tons of money, and they had to pay to rebuild that part of the city.
Jill get in here because I feel like he was just a dude who was hired, right?
We'll get to that. Well, he sort of was, but he was the overseer of this entire tank. So it was ultimately up to him. Like, let's be real. All the problems with this tank were Gell's problems. Damon Hall asked him how he could decide that it was going to be a safe structure if he didn't ask anyone. And Gell said, well, it looked fine, and that they wanted a safety factor of 3. Which,
3?
Yeah, which means that with safety in mind, it was supposed to hold 3 times the amount of molasses than it would actually have the capacity for.
How does that work?
So, in safety factors...
I think you're talking about a pressure thing.
Yes,
right?
In safety factors, what I'm saying is that when they're looking at safety, they want to make sure that the capacity for the tank, the walls of it can hold 3 times the amount of pressure, but it won't. It's for safety reasons.
So essentially, just to reiterate,
the redundancies.
When you fill,
yes, it's a redundancy.
When you fill the tank, there's a certain amount of pressure is applied on the tank.
Right.
That needs to be able to hold 3 times that amount of pressure.
Just for the safety. It's like
that makes
putting a
sense.
helmet on.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Put a helmet on your molasses
That means
tank.
no matter what temperature it's at, you're always safe because 3 times.
It's 3 times the amount of pressure than what is in there at
because
capacity.
you can't put 3 times the amount of capacity.
Yeah, it's a physical impossibility.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, let me kind of tell you how flawed that logic sort of is. Because first of all, it was never tested for a safety factor of 3, and if they would have tested it for any safety factor, they would have known that molasses weighs more than water, and so they were looking at the safety factor in the realm of water. But when you actually do all the math, and I can't break down the math to you because I suck at math notoriously.
And I don't want you to because that would be boring.
But what it actually means, all said and done, what it actually means is this tank actually had a safety factor of just over 1, meaning it could only stand it for just so long. And 4 years, honestly, they got lucky. They got lucky.
They should have filled it with blood because blood is thicker than water.
Nice.
I was going to make a joke, molasses is thicker than water, but...
I beat you to it.
You did.
So as far as what happened to Arthur Gell, he would go on to be the assistant treasurer of the USIA. He was never punished at all for any of this. He actually got a promotion for doing this.
Gel?
Yeah.
And he's still alive today, and we got him on the show. Gel, come on out.
Defend your case.
He's like... He's like,
remember the molasses.
Like, what do you think of molasses? He's like, oh, I hate molasses. It's thick and it's gooey and it gets everywhere.
Yeah.
Star Wars reference.
Yeah. So, surprise, surprise, the USIA lost the case.
Oh.
And at the time ended up paying $628,000 in damages. In today's money, that is $9.08 million, adjusted for inflation. Now, relatives of those killed, reportedly, or injured, received around $7,000 per victim, which is the equivalent of $101,000 today, adjusted for inflation.
6 figures.
Yeah, so they were compensated, but I mean, it's not going to bring back their loved ones, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you can pay for, your rent in Seattle.
Right,
Yeah.
for a month.
A month, exactly.
I mean,
1 month's rent in Seattle.
yeah. And also, I mean, even with all the inflation adjustments, so each person's getting, they're getting 6 figs. That's dope. But like we said earlier, adjusted for inflation, just the property damage before anybody got killed.
Right.
We're at $100 million.
Right, yes.
So they paid pennies.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the long-standing American tradition of fining mega corporations in such a paltry way that it barely hinders the way they do business. It's a tradition that's long-standing, and we're really proud of in this country. So,
Oh, yeah. You gotta let the capitalist ship keep running, man.
Yeah.
Guess
Whether
so.
it's a bank or a pharmaceutical company or a distillery, we make sure to keep those guys afloat because,
I guess they're more important than our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Soon after, molasses was sort of replaced as a sweetener, and due to technological innovations, it was no longer needed to make munitions, so they didn't really build another tank in Boston. So, honestly, right after the tank burst, it was sort of needless. They're like, forget it.
the public opinion
what?
had soured on the sweetener.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
You keep
That's
making
pretty
some.
fucking
You
good.
keep making some good ones here, Tyler. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
You done it.
I'm Tyler Armentrout, and that's the news. Back to you in the studio.
Looks like public opinion soured on the sweetener. Back to you, John. John's my cat.
Yeah.
So, were all these molasses factories based out of Boston then? Or?
No. They were all around the East Coast in general.
Okay.
Because the sugar cane was shipped up from Puerto Rico.
That sounds about right.
We're from more places than just that, but our main area of getting sugar cane was from Puerto Rico, so it's generally on the East Coast. This was one of the bigger tanks that were constructed. Like, there was one in New York, there was a couple more, but none of them, or at least not many of them, could hold 2.3 million gallons of molasses. They could hold gallons of molasses in somewhere in like the hundreds of thousands of pounds, but
I feel
it was
like
giant. It was big.
this story is ripe for James Cameron to make a big event movie out of.
For a second, I thought you were going to say for James Cameron to make his own molasses tank.
I mean,
Well, he probably would.
I wouldn't put it past him.
I don't think he would be that bad.
I know that the guy, he made the whole Titanic, right? Like,
Well, and he's like diving into the ocean.
yeah,
and
he's
stuff.
doing all that shit.
Yeah.
I feel like if he was like, if I'm gonna make the molasses movie, I'm gonna make the tank.
Why does he
It's-
sound like
Why does he have the accent?
Why does he sound like a wise guy?
Because he's from Jersey.
Is he?
I don't know. I know he doesn't talk like that. I've
He's
heard him in
not from
interviews.
I want to see the story of star-crossed lovers, like a poor boy from the streets and the rich girl, and they're there for the christening of the molasses tank.
At the very
We're gonna
end,
fudge history a little.
They knock like a champagne
Yeah.
bottle
At
against
the
it.
very end,
And then it
he's-
explodes.
he sinks into the molasses, and she's like,
I'll never let go until
Well,
the
and
molasses
there's like a
gets
hand
ya.
sticking out.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he gives the thumbs
Yeah,
up.
T2,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, Terminator.
yeah. He's also a Terminator.
Yeah, turns out.
It's a cross between Titanic and Terminator, and it's about the Great Molasses Flood. Get on that movie.
Yeah,
Just like
you can have that.
just
James
like
Cameron.
how James Cameron would want, honestly.
Yeah,
He's like, that's a great idea for a movie.
yeah.
I'm James Cameron.
That's a
an
pretty
uncanny-
pretty spot on
Yeah.
impression.
And also the
I'm gonna make
molasses
a movie about
would,
space natives. And they're blue. And it's gonna be in 3D.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make one every 10 years.
And the molasses has a it's sentient. And they use like a CGI. It's a CGI character.
It's so weird that
Like the
James
Abyss.
Cameron is in the room with this, guys.
Yeah.
We have him here. We just have him all
Ladies and gentlemen,
tied up.
James Cameron coming up.
He's all tied up. He's screaming.
I like blue cat aliens.
Yes.
Okay, James.
I don't know whether it's just his fists or also his mouths that are just gripping pastrami.
All in all, this is a story really of corporate greed and blatant disregard for human life in exchange for profits. That's
Sure.
what this story is about.
So Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds a little familiar, doesn't it?
It's really great that things have changed, guys.
Oh, yeah. The world is such a...
It's been 100 years, and we are in a socialist paradise.
Yeah.
And sometimes we
Or
learn...
capitalism is ruining everything, and the Amazon is burning.
Yeah.
Whoopsie daisy.
But
The wrong Amazon is burning.
this is also a story of everyday people becoming heroes in extraordinary situations that... I mean, how do you prepare for a goddamn molasses flood?
You don't.
And there's more heroes than there are villains in this story, which honestly, if there is some silver lining in this story, I feel like that's where it's at. Is that there are people remembered that people really came together and strangers can do good things for each other.
And they didn't only come together because they were bound in a syrup of molasses. It was also more of an effort.
Yeah.
They weren't stuck together just because of the molasses. They stuck together because of the sense of community,
Yeah.
neighborhood, and love for one's brother.
Yeah.
And molasses.
And molasses.
And they were literally stuck together with molasses, too. So,
Now,
and that was the worst part.
the molasses flood would set a precedent for building standards moving forward.
No more giant tanks of molasses that are clearly going to explode.
Well, inspectors, engineers showing their work, how they build buildings, seeing if something is sound, laws saying, hey, you gotta test this, things like that, Pretty obvious things, I feel.
Their deaths weren't in vain.
I certainly hope not.
This needs to be a movie, and I want to see that one scientist who's like, that molasses tank is going to blow, and everyone's like, shut up, you scientist.
Well, you got Isaac Gonzalez that was working there that was like, this thing is gonna fall apart.
Well, that's Isaac Gonzalez. He'd be played by, I don't know. Isaac, what's his name? Poe?
Yeah, the guy from
Oscar Isaac?
Oscar Isaac. There you go.
His first name is
He'd
Oscar.
be like, I can't take this guy seriously because you give me these warnings, but I'm lost in his eyes. He's a fucking handsome guy.
How come I feel like with this television movie that we're
It would be
in the middle
casting.
of writing, casting right now, Dennis Leary would play as the prosecutor, the one that brings everybody together.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he would.
Oh, you mean
100%.
the counsel for the plaintiffs, Damon Hall?
Exactly.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, because
Dennis
he's like
Leary.
bombastic. Yeah. Oh, that would
Totally
be great.
Dennis Leary. Just
Is this the
smoking.
musical that we're casting
Oh,
right
yeah.
now?
This is the musical.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh wait, did Bill Hicks have material where he played a prosecutor? Because that'd be great for Dennis Leary to work off of.
Well, he did have that whole bit about...
That was a good one, Tyler. That was one from out of left field right
No,
there.
remember that great Bill Hicks bit about the molasses flood?
Yeah.
Well, specifically the prosecutor. It was very specific.
Who would be Arthur Gell?
Mark Strong.
No, I'm gonna say
Is it still
Stanley
musical?
Tucci. Stanley Tucci.
Oh, Stanley Tucci
Tooch.
is a good pick.
The Tooch is good.
Especially 90s Stanley Tucci.
I think, what was his name? Martin McClower? What was that?
Yeah, yeah, what's the
Martin
spelling on that?
Clowerty.
Yeah, used to be a boxer.
That would be Hugh Jackman.
That's not bad. Not bad.
Yeah.
Rescued.
And Tim Curry as the molasses.
Yeah, right.
Right.
We're all in agreement. Now, some say, we mentioned this earlier in passing, but some say in the north end of Boston that you can still, on a hot day, smell the molasses. Now, I don't know if this is true.
I call it bullshit.
I call bullshit too. I don't know if this is true. If there's anyone that lives in Boston that is listening to this right now, please let us know. I truly truly am curious to see if you can actually smell molasses in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I will leave my bunker to lick the sidewalk to make sure it tastes like molasses.
And they said for years after, like signposts and railings.
Oh yeah,
like
sticky.
everything was sticky because
people would go and they would want to see it. They would want to see the spill, and so onlookers would go, and then they'd like ride trains afterwards, and like all the railings, everything would be all sticky. So like Boston was just a sticky place for a while.
I told you. Molasses, it gets everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
Anakin Skywalker said that. Remember that from
sand?
It's one of the reasons why you don't use molasses.
Because in the prequels, Anakin was born on that molasses planet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right.
That movie I probably would have enjoyed.
You would think after that they would have changed the name of Boston to Molassachusetts.
Nice. Or the
Good
state.
job,
What it would have been, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Now-
Because that's the name of the state.
Yeah, I know.
Now I got one more fact for you guys. One more thing.
Hit me
Just
with
before we close out this episode, do you guys know there was another one?
Another molasses flood.
It wasn't quite a flood, but there was another one. On the 9th of September, any guess to what year?
2018.
2001.
Quick guess, Zach? Guess?
1642.
I was gonna say that maybe the other one happened September 9th,
September
2001, and it was all over the news, and then 9/11 happened, and they're like, we got way bigger fish to fry.
It happened on the hot
bullshit. I like
It happened on the
your
hot
thinking, 'cause I was
streets
thinking
of
the
New
same
York
thing.
City in 1974.
No.
Across
But-
110th Street.
Okay, so actually it was September 9th, 2013
Boom.
in Honolulu. A pipe burst.
Hawaii.
And 1,400 gallons of molasses leaked into the harbor, killing untold number of fish and marine wildlife.
That's some sweet, sweet poke right there.
Yeah.
And it is impossible to clean up. It actually is an ecological disaster.
Well,
That
So,
sucks.
there you go.
Hooray!
So we haven't
So we
gotten
learned
over
nothing.
Yeah, we haven't gotten over our molasses problems.
I mean, they almost made it 100 years before molasses disasters, so...
How much
Yeah.
molasses has poured into the ocean versus how much oil has poured
oil's
into
gotta be
oils,
easily.
Thanks, yeah,
absolutely on
BP,
top of
totally.
Remember
that.
that BP shit?
Yeah.
Oh, that BP shit.
I'm
topped it.
sorry.
All right, well, that's an episode for another day.
Sure.
But yeah, that is the Great Molasses, the Great Boston Molasses Flood.
Molasses.
Molasticer.
Yeah,
The Belasticer.
The
Yeah.
Molasticer.
as I guess it is known.
I mean, like, honestly, how cool would have it been if instead of molasses, that was rum? I mean, it's sugarcane from Puerto Rico.
It would have been less deadly.
I mean, it would
Then
have
People would have been
fantastic.
partying longer.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
would have been fucked up, dude.
Like,
Just stumbling
like that
around.
homeboy that was trapped underneath the fucking pool table and everything.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll drink my way out of here.
Exactly. Just give him a little silly straw, a little umbrella.
poor,
and shit.
poor George Leahy.
Pour some fruit
I know.
juices.
George
Uh,
Leahy.
Anyway,
He was great on Trailer Park Boys.
Trailer park.
Different
Yeah,
guy.
Canada.
yeah. Anyway, thank you for listening again. By the time you're listening to this, our first episode has come out.
We've released an episode.
We have.
We've gotten
Finally.
one review.
That's great.
It was positive.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, those reviews do help us too. Like, you don't really know how much they help until you actually run a podcast. Those 5-star reviews do help us. Please consider doing that. And but
Yeah.
I get it. Like, you don't have to. You listening is the most important part.
Yeah, thank you to anybody who's listened or
Yeah, and
any amount of effort is appreciated.
it truly
wholeheartedly.
is. We do put a lot of work into this.
Well, it's thanks to Jerry Nash. He's
Jerry
the one that's
puts a lot
doing
of
all the
work
fucking work.
Like maybe you're somebody that owed me money. And
I
I got a grudge against you, and then I find out you listened to the podcast, subscribed to it,
call
and,
it good.
and left a 5-star review. I'd probably call it about even Stevens.
It would.
So,
I would reconsider my opinion.
so think about that.
Again, I'm Jerry Nash,
I'm Tyler Armentrout.
I'm Christopher Whedon.
I'm Zach Meck.
and we are the History Boys.
History Boys.
Have a good night,
Nice. Have a good one.
History. Bye.